and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. My name is Nathan Staples, and joining me this week are Eric Devine and our editor-in-chief, Christian Nuri. The French football season has been full of upsets and full of revitalised characters, and none more so than this past week, but we will jump into all that after your latest headlines. Nice are rightfully garnering all the headlines this week with two strong results in beating Saint-Etienne yesterday at the Geoffroy Guichard 4-1, and a result that came off the back of a 6-1 midweek thumping of Bordeaux. In other matches from matchday 8, Reims managed to stay among the European places thanks to a 1-0 win over Lille on Friday. His early match saw Paris Saint-Germain increase their lead at the top of the table, coming back from a goal down to defeat Nantes 4-1. In the multiplex, Caen also continued their strong start to the season with a 2-0 win over Gazlec, whilst an inspired Bastia got an unlikely brace from Sebastian Squillaci to see off Toulouse 3-0. Rennes missed a chance to go second against Troyes, needing a late Fallo Diagne goal to salvage a point at home. While in Bordeaux, it was the Wabry Kazri show as the hosts punished a rotated Lyon side 3-1. Sunday saw quite a goal fest across France, with Angers continuing their own surprising start, defeating Marseille 2-1 at the Velodrome. In the late afternoon fixtures, Montpellier notched their first win of the season 2-1 over Lorient, while at the Stade Roudou, Guingamp and Monaco played out a 3-3 thriller that was short on defending but high on entertainment, Nicolas Benazet scoring twice and providing the assist for Sloan Privat for the home side. The other midweek fixtures feature few remarkable results other than Monaco's comeback 3-2 win over Montpellier, which combined with Sunday's results suggest that Ligue may have a new entertainer. In Ligue 2, Dijon have opened up a 4-point lead over Metz at the top, while surprising Créteil and Bourg-en-Bresse level or the third on their 16 points. Ligue 1 resumes tomorrow with Nantes visiting Lyon, while Lyon host Valencia in the Champions League. Paris Saint-Germain are away to Shakhtar Donetsk on Wednesday, while in the Europa League, things are a bit tougher for the French sides, with Saint-Etienne travelling to Lazio, Monaco hosting Tottenham Hotspur, and Bordeaux making the arduous journey to play Rubin Kazan in Russia. Marseille, the lone side to emerge victorious on matchday 1, hosts Slovan Liberec. That's all for the news for now, and for all your latest breaking news, head on over to our website and our Twitter. The links are in the description. Our first topic today focuses on that fantastic week for Nice. 2 games, 10 goals, and Claude Puel's side are really flying high at the moment. Christian, what do you make to their start, and especially those 2 results they've got this week?
Well, I think their slow start was a bit misleading as to how the rest of the season looks set to go now, because that's a completely new attacking troika you've got up front there that Puel was dealing with. But also we have to remember that Nice have fundamentally changed formation this season, going to what now seems to be the sort of style in Ligue 1 at the beginning of this 2015-16 campaign of a 4-1-2-1-2 formation, which sees very little width outside of fullbacks bombing forward, but also allows attacking players to peel off. So anyway, I think the results on paper are absolutely stunning. Against Bordeaux, we need to remember, of course, they went behind at first to, I believe it was a Plachel goal, and are able to come back extremely well and lead 2-1 at halftime before Bordeaux have a man sent off, and then obviously they go on and capitulate. So OGC Nice's form has been inspired undoubtedly by the presence of Hatem Ben Arfa. Those 2 goals against Saint-Etienne last night were absolutely mesmerizing, and he's really showing those doubters at the start of the season about both his temperament but also his attitude, that actually he can perform extremely well, whilst also really advising the younger members of this Nice squad. And we have to remember this Nice team, on a weekendly basis, is fielding a starting 11 with the average age of about 23, 24, no more than that. So Hatem Ben Arfa has not only shown his fantastic ability as a footballer and what might have been had his temperament not got in the way of the last 5-6 years, but also he's showing another side of Hatem Ben Arfa, which is this sort of father-like approach with some of the really young but also very talented and and promising Nice attackers. But it'd be foolish just to single out one individual. Vincent Cosiello, the teenager who came through the ranks last season already, towards the end of last season. Claude Puel's a big fan of his, and he showed incredible maturity this week, I think, especially with a rather busy schedule, to come out on top and be able to dominate, especially with his good passing ability. One of the trickier midfields rather in the league in Saint-Etienne. Nampalys Mendy has been an unsung hero in Ligue 1 for a good part of 18 months now, and has played the role of captain when Bodmer has been out. So he's really an integral part of that side. But Nice are achieving all this with a very, very creaky defense, and it has to be said, if they can sort that out and deal with some unfortunate injury problems which we've seen. I mean, up until last night, Nice were playing Olivier Boscagli as a centre-back. Now, this is someone who came from the reserve team when they sold Jordan Amavi to initially come in and play left-back. And, he's now playing centre-back. So he's not even I don't even believe he signed a professional contract yet. So, and then we've got Jérémy Pied, who is normally a veteran Ligue 1 winger, playing at right-back this season and doing quite well there. So, and not lest we forget as well, Simon Pouplin, who is Nice's first-choice goalkeeper, suffered an injury on match day 1 against Monaco. And Wes Hassen, he's supposedly very talented, but has already cost Nice about 3 or 4 goals this season. So the potential for Nice to go and do something really incredible is there. The question is, can Puel keep his young team grounded, and also continue to give them that confidence which we saw on the pitch against Bordeaux and also at the Stade Geoffroy Guichard last night?
Eric, how impressed have you been by Nice in the last week?
Yeah, I mean, on paper, this is, tremendous results. You can even date it back to the victory over Bastia on match day 6, going away to Corsica is never an easy task either. So yeah, it's great to see a team playing in this, full-flowing attack, and it's great to see Ben Arfa come back and be the sort of incandescent presence that we know he can be. I mean, I even saw a few people on Twitter talking about him maybe having a chance to play for France again. Wouldn't go that far, especially with the options ahead of him for Les Bleus, but it's good to see a player, with a somewhat checkered past, especially recently, playing like this. He had the goals yesterday. He had a little back heel to Ricardo, who had the assist on Cosiello's opener. He really just being the catalyst in that attack, whether it's scoring or helping to create as well. But yeah, this is really surprising from Puel, formation-wise and philosophy-wise. He relied on attacking fullbacks during his best days at Lyon too. Thinking back to the likes of Ali Sissoko and Anthony Riviere there, but it wasn't as expansive a team going forward, even with those attacking fullbacks. They would often in his Lyon days use 2 defensive midfielders, usually Makoun and Gonalon, during that Champions League semifinal run, but it wasn't quite as dynamic a team. And we look at, especially I'm looking at the fullbacks that he's using as of late, Ricardo and Pied. I mean, these are both essentially converted wingers. Ricardo, having come in this season, is generally been used at left wing, both for the Portuguese international team and during his stint in the Liga NOS, which is the Portuguese league. He's generally been a left winger, not a left back. So it's really a sort of a bold decision from Puel to do that. And as Christian rightly said, it does and has left Nice unnecessarily open at the back a little bit. But we've got Mendy holding down the base of midfield, and Cosiello and Seri are both 2 players who've been shown themselves to be willing workers. Again, that Diamond 4-4-2 is not all that dissimilar, at least in midfield, to the way that Lyon have been operating currently under Hubert Fournier, and it's shown itself to be a really dynamic formation. Even if you've got the right personnel. I do sort of have to question the results a little bit. The Bordeaux result, yes, it was impressive, but you're playing that amount of time against 10 men. You should win, especially playing that style. The Saint-Etienne result's a little bit more surprising. I mean, if you look at that Saint-Etienne team on paper, yeah, they're probably going to be looking ahead to the Europa League match on Thursday, and they might be a little bit tired, but I mean, that's for all intents and purposes, Christophe Galtier's first team squad. Kevin Teofil Catherine would probably start over Malcuit were he healthy, but for the time being, that's close to his best 11. So it was really surprising to see them rack up that kind of result against a team that's usually so strong defensively. I do worry about, in their next few matches, how they're going to cope without Mendy, who was sent off with, I believe, a straight red card. There doesn't seem to be an easy substitute, an easy way to bring in another player for him to anchor that midfield. So, we'll kind of have to see how that goes. Maybe moving Bodmer up into midfield and having Le Marchand and the youngster Boscagli play in defense. So let's see how this goes. It's fun to watch a team play like this, but I'm not yet convinced that Nice can sustain this. It seems to be a little bit more circumstantial at present.
It's interesting. I think we have to gush a little bit about Hatem Ben Arfa for a moment, because his first was good. His second was utterly sublime. I mean, he was running through defenders like they weren't there, I don't think, at one point, and he was showing that talent that he's always seemed to have, Christian. Could he have some sort of a renaissance in Nice, in this kind of club? Is this the right place for him to be now?
Well, I think first of all we have to congratulate Pour-Alain River, the OGC Nice president, for taking this risk. Because for a club like Nice, it is a substantial financial risk. While he is a free agent, the wages are certainly, I believe he is actually the top earner at the club. So, first of all, congratulations to them for taking that risk, but also congratulations to Ben Arfa for turning down offers where he was going to be earning 5 or 6 times as much as he was earning at Nice from the Middle East and from Asia over that 6-month period, when his initial move to Nice in last January fell through because of FIFA rules on how many clubs you can play for per season. Can he have a renaissance at Nice? I think it's certainly possible. Now, he was asked about the French national team last night, and he sort of quite rightly said it's far too early to be talking about things like that. And I think actually Didier Deschamps' general standpoint against volatile characters will count against him if he gets there. But the important thing is that he's in a group which is truly one of the most tight-knit squads in Ligue 1 at the moment, and which has a great team spirit, and it's founded on this idea of giving youth a chance and giving people generally from the local area, that chance to play in some with some of the best facilities in France. And the Ben Arfa's come in, and he's sort of, as I said earlier, taken some of these younger players under his wing. And what it seems to be is, it seems like he's very much enjoying this role and enjoying being able to pass on some advice, etc. But I think the most important thing for Ben Arfa is that he keeps his feet rooted on the ground. He doesn't think that all of a sudden, because he scored a sort of Messi-esque goal, that he's now in control of the team. He can do what he wants. He doesn't have to track back, which he's been doing fantastically well, actually, very uncharacteristically since the start of the season. And that he maintains the sort of bond which he's made with Claude Puel, the OGC Nice manager, who has shown incredible faith again in Ben Arfa, but also in Ben Arfa to really lead this team. And it's been a great vision, which seems to be perhaps coming together now. But can he have a renaissance at Nice? We've got to remember he's only on a 1-year contract. It might be a short-lived one, but there's nothing to say he can't score goals like that every week.
Yeah, and it's interesting to try and say keep your feet on the ground, Hatem Ben Arfa, because it's been a problem in the past. But you say in that father kind of role, the elder statesman in that team a little bit more seemed to ground him. But let's put these results in a little bit of perspective. Obviously, Nice have climbed the table with the 2 wins, but they lose players like Valentin Esseric, Eric Botiak, Neil Maupay, and Jordan Amarvi in the summer, which were significant contributors, let's be honest, for the team in the past year or two. Eric, can this really continue, do you think, or do they still need a couple more reinforcements maybe in January to really sustain any sort of Europa League challenge, would you think?
It's hard to say. I think that, despite losing those players, I think that Nice did really well to bring in the players they did bring in. I mentioned Ricardo again. Seri is done incredibly well as well. I mean, and the promotions of Coziello and and Boscaglia, and Germain on loan. This is a team that's really impressed me with the way that they seem to have retooled and refigured things quite so quickly. Paul Bice is another one from Saint Etienne. Do they need reinforcements? I would say I'd really like to see another defensive midfielder. The absence of Mendy over the next few matches is really going to hurt them. I know Bodmer can play there, but he doesn't. He sort of lacks the dynamism that Mendy brings to his game. I mean, Bodmer's a little bit older, so that's necessarily going to be an issue with the way that midfield play. I mean, we saw with Lyon over the weekend how important that having that holding midfielder there can be to a side shape. Without Gonalon, Lyon sort of collapsed, and I can see similar things happening to Nice in Mendy's extended absence. So perhaps another defensive midfielder, but I think the rest of the team's pretty solid front to back. Hopefully Poupelin can come back sooner rather than later. Hassan, is a fine, young international player, but he's still got a lot to learn. It was the same case last year as it is this year. So, perhaps another more experienced goalkeeper to sort of not be relying on Hassan week in and week out, given Popelin's injury history, would be a good move as well. But yeah, their needs are minimal, if any. I think if they continue playing in this way.
Yeah, and they've made a really exciting start to the season. And I think Christian made a good point of this 4-1-2-1-2 that seems to be slowly growing a reputation in France. I think Lyon might have started that. That might be why. And we will move on to that team now because Alexandre Lacazette has hit the headlines once again with his interview in L'Equipe, which you can read on our website, but I will sum a little bit in here. He hit out at President Jean-Michel Aulas, revealing the contract talks they had during the summer and so far this season, saying he was hurt by the attitude of the president, and also that he feels unprotected by manager Hubert Fournier. He threw some real barbs at them both there. Is this a case of the Lyon star striker throwing his toys out the pram a little, Christian?
Interesting question, Nathan. I think that the difficulty with Alexandre Lacazette is we're never going to fully know what happened this summer in terms of transfer talks, in terms of negotiations. And one thing I will say is it was very out of character for Jean-Michel Aulas to release the exact figure that he was willing to pay Alexandre Lacazette in the summer in terms of a contract extension. And then, also disclosing how much Lacazette was holding out for, his agent was holding out for. Now that seemed to me a very kamikaze and sort of short-term attempt to fix a problem which was at the time, Lyon fans getting very agitated about their summer transfer window and worried about, the summer and what it would bring, because we have to remember that most of Lyon's business was done towards the end of that window, aside from Morel, really. So is he throwing his toys out the pram? In this case, I'd have to say, Lacazette, from his point of view, is looking for answers, because this problem is gone on for much longer, and it's actually about his form on the pitch, I think. And we have not seen the Alexandre Lacazette of 2014 at all this calendar year, I'd argue. He scored something like 5 goals only, aside from penalties, this season in competitive fixtures. He only recently ended a 700-minute spell of going without a goal entirely. Hubert Fournier has been growing a bit of a reputation recently of throwing his players under the bus after a poor result. And against Ghent, I believe it was, in the Champions League, he makes some strange comment about how Lacazette's penalty missed might cost them dear in the long run, etc. Now, there's no need to do that to a player who's already put himself under an immense amount of pressure to replicate what he managed to do last season. A player who's under a lot of pressure from the fans, but also a player who's under pressure from the coaching staff. And he referenced this in his interview with L'Equipe this morning. He said that when he came back from pre-season and the coaching staff could quite clearly see he was he had drawn features and he was very much down about it. They were quite agitated, quite disappointed. because there's been a considerable intake of players this summer for Lyon. And when there is a squad overhaul or a change around in the makeup of a team, you're looking for those individuals who have been there through it all to lead from the front. And Lacazette's not been able to do so. Now, he made some stupid decisions, notably deciding to play with his back pain this past week. Even since Ghent, actually, he's had this bad back pain, and it meant that he couldn't play again on Saturday. He looks like he's in the squad. He's actually in the squad for the game against Valencia tomorrow, which again I question: is he completely fit? Does this make a lot of sense? If he's not completely fit, then surely you're just accentuating the problem. And so Alexandre Lacazette's situation is difficult because not only is he not in the form of his life, but he does feel a little bit like he's been thrown on the bus from all quarters of Lyon. And I mean, I think, to be honest, to me it's all summed up with that rather iconic picture from the summer transfer window now, where he's in a press conference after the unveiling of his contract extension, and he can't even force a smile, Nathan. He honestly looks like he'd much rather be somewhere else, and he's very, very much down in the dumps, and there's several photos to that effect. So the Lacazette problem is not one that's going away quickly for Lyon, and I think his form was such an important factor last season for their Champions League and even league title push. We've got to remember they came quite close to the league title. So I think as long as Lacazette mentally cannot get himself to be in the right shape, but also physically, because this injury is still causing him problems, then I think Lyon's season is going to be very difficult.
Eric, what do you think to the comments, really?
I mean, I think this is a really serious issue for Lyon. For these comments to come out the day before a hugely important Champions League match shows a real lack of class on Lacazette's part. I don't know when he made these comments. Maybe it was earlier in the week, and they keep publishing them today for maximum effect. But it just shows a real lack of big picture a big picture thought process on the player's part, and it's really disappointing. I think that all things considered, Lyon had a pretty good window. They're obviously trying to build depth to be a serious player in the Champions League. They saw themselves given a fairly favorable group draw. Valencia is a team on the rise in Spain, sure, but Zenit are sort of in disarray, having been forced to sell Rondon to make their foreigner quotas, and Villas-Boas announcing he's going to leave. This seemed like a group for the taking, and now, the club are obviously having to lower their ambitions a little bit. I think they can certainly still progress, provided they get a result tomorrow. But this is a team that's trying its best to improve the situation, knowing the magnitude of talent of the players they have at their disposal, and specifically that's Fekir and that's Lacazette. So the team gave him an improved deal. They brought in more players in Valbuena and Bovu to support him up front, to aid in that attack, to take some of the pressure off of him, so he's not feeling this constant pressure to play and pressure to perform. But he just doesn't seem to be responding in a leadership role, both with these comments and his play on the pitch. He's been given the armband a couple times last season and this season, but I certainly don't think he's been deserving of that in general. And it's just really disappointing to see. I mean, we've seen this player on form, be genuinely one of Europe's top strikers, but he'll be 25 before the season's out. It's time to show a little bit of maturity on his part. I appreciate him trying to play through pain, but even that in and of itself is a bit selfish. You need to look at the big picture. It's a long league on a season. There's not, to me, a strong established second team besides PSG. So if it means sitting out a handful of games earlier in the league on a season and coming back fit in early October or whatever time frame he would need to have that injury no longer be a factor, he needs to do that. He needs to take a look at the bigger picture, both on and off the pitch, to be the player that he was for Lyon last season. Let that injury heal, come back strong, come back confident, and lead this team like you're supposed to. I mean, this is his 6th season at the club at a senior level, and he needs to show some maturity and just be a force for this team like he can be.
I think it's an interesting point about his injury, and I think that the injury that Nabil Fekir suffered has really put the pressure on Lacazette to be the main role. I think he feels like he has to be on the pitch every single game because he knows that he's not 100% certain that, although he's not getting the goals, I don't think he thinks that anyone else can do it. But I think taking a wider perspective on this, it's a very player-motivated, player-centric age that we live in football at the moment. And I think this situation really draws parallels with another contract situation this summer, which is Raheem Sterling at Liverpool. The difference is Lacazette's a player that is from Lyon, loves the club, and probably wanted to sign a new deal because he felt it was right with the club. Sterling is a player that wanted a new deal, didn't get the deal he wanted and left. Lacazette probably, let's be honest, settles on a deal that Christian makes an excellent point that he sort of wasn't particularly looking like he was delighted about. But it's such a tender. We'll talk about this maybe in further depth, Christian. It's a very player-centric game nowadays. Should Lyon really have appeased Lacazette maybe a little bit more and got him happy, and then hoped that the start of the season could have been a little bit better, him a bit more switched on?
No, I think the difference between the situation and Raheem Sterling's situation is that almost everything that Alexandre Lacazette and his agent David Antideli tried to do in the summer was very much behind closed doors. There were no stupid outbursts or unauthorized interviews. Now, I don't think Alexandre Lacazette for a long while is going to be, maybe it'll be several months. He's not going to be happy because what he really wanted was to move on last summer. And that is what can only be the reality of the situation, because he's been given the contract that he asked for, or supposedly asked for. But you say, Nathan, that actually we live in a football world which is very player-centric. It's only player-centric if you decide to make it so. Now, Jean-Michel Aulas, his policy all summer could have been, we don't necessarily need Lacazette. He hasn't been that good, and he could have recouped necessarily 60 million euro for the player. Actually, probably even upwards of 60 million euro for the player. Instead, he stated time and time again how important Lacazette is to the club. So much so that the fans now obviously are completely 100% on board with that. And because of, I hate to say it, a slightly childish fantasy that Aulas seems to have of Lacazette playing in the new stadium in the Champions League, scoring a hat-trick or winning the Champions League or whatever he seems to dream of at night, I don't think he approached the situation with much realism at all. Now, of course, obviously, as a chairman, you want to keep your best players, but Aulas on the one hand likes to wax lyrical about how Ligue 1 clubs must sell to the Premier League. He was talking about that in an interview rather with France Football last week. But at the same time, then doesn't necessarily want to play ball. I think Lyon's problems are actually mainly, don't have less to do with Lacazette and more to do with the fact that they've not really lived through this change of formation from what was effectively a 4-3-3 at times last season with N'Jie and Fekir on either side of Lacazette, but all three giving the freedom to roam around that attacking area to this 4-1-2-1-2, which has come about, I think, simply because of Mathieu Valbuena's inclusion. Now, has Hubert Fournier thought about sticking with a 4-3-3? Mathieu Valbuena seems to do very well for France in a 4-3-3. Lacazette, of course, could play on the wing, but obviously Claudio Beauvue is probably better suited. Up until last season, he played on the wing. So I think tactically Fournier is struggling a bit, and actually this Lacazette is only going to make himself a fall guy with these comments. And as Eric said, Lyon will have authorized this interview with L'Équipe, but we don't know when Lacazette necessarily gave it. And before a big match in a group that I still think is for the taking for Lyon. I mean, Valencia have been horrible this season so far, barring their Champions League qualification pair of games against Monaco. And as Eric rightly says, then it is is a football club in absolute disarray. And with all due respect to Ghent, they fought extremely well, but technically they were not better than Lyon. And 8 out of 10 times that game goes differently on a different day, where Lyon's players are in a different frame of mind. And there was this sense of, again, Orlas bigging up the idea that we're starting our Champions League campaign again. Just take a bit of pressure off the players. Let them ease into the Champions League. Again, Lyon have a very young squad. What is the point on hooting the horn and putting too much pressure on your players to perform?
Eric, I'm sure you're desperate to jump in on this one. Is Aulas at fault for part of this, really?
I mean, it's hard to place much. Wow, let's see. I mean, he needs.
I know it's a difficult one.
Eric, you're right there.
Yeah, no, it's hard to think about this because I feel like Aulas in this situation is not knowing whether to stick or twist with Lacazette. I mean, obviously he can be the centerpiece of a really great team on form, but his philosophy through and through is that Lyon, through all those titles, through all that success, the team's still a project. I'm not saying a project in the development sense, but in terms of no one player is bigger than the team. We saw that with Lisandro. We saw that with Juninho. When it was time for a player to go, we saw it with Benzema, with Essien. If the right price could be gotten for a player, that price will be taken, and the club will be all the better for it. But I feel like with Lacazette right now, maybe it's Aulas's old age or whatever. I mean, I think he's in his later mid-60s. He's not getting any younger. I think perhaps some level of sentimentality has crept into his decision-making surrounding Lacazette, and I think that it's manifested itself in a number of, frankly, unhealthy ways. Both the way he sort of bullied the player in contract negotiations, and I think perhaps failed to get a good price for him this summer. I think that Lyon could certainly be looking at, injuries are obviously a factor right now with Fekir, Raphael, and Gambiwa out. But that being said, I think that selling Lacazette and getting a good, if not exceptional, replacement, that would have been the right move for the club going forward. But, for whatever reason, be it sentimentality or just drinking the Kool-Aid of Lacazette's early season going last year, Aulas has failed to make the right decision for this club in the long term by dealing with Lacazette in this way. Back injury or not, he's clearly not happy this season with the club and with his own play, and this level of frustration, I just can't see it having a good end. And I think, so to that end, yeah, I do think Aulas is at fault. He's failed to show his usual good judgment in dealing with the player, and it's looking like it's going to have a negative long-term impact on this team, both this season and beyond.
It's a real worry, isn't it? And I think the real worry from the point of view of Lyon fans is this is a half-bad season won't detract teams from coming in next summer and maybe getting a cut price deal. And there's one person who will certainly be watching this situation closely, and that's someone like Nabil Fekir, who's probably the next one after Lacazette, if he comes back strong and has another good half of the season, that teams are going to start looking at because he's at that age that teams want to buy players at. And I'm certain there might be more sharks circling in the summer, but Jean-Michel Aulas needs to do a little bit more. Just very quickly, Christian, Hubert Fournier was brought up in the comments. Is there cracks in starting to show?
I think there were cracks, to be honest, showing last season as well with Fournier, and his, tactically he did extremely well with Reims. He also did extremely well last season, I thought, with Lyon. But he's never been that good of a man manager, and he's always had to rely on coaches around him to sort of rally those players. And in terms of a motivational individual, which is exactly what Lyon need right now, someone to really rally the troops. And you've got to remember that Lyon are still bringing in young players who've barely got any professional football, the likes of Kalulu, and others. So you've got this strange mix of sort of disenchanted older part of the squad and youngsters who are still trying to find their footing in the professional game. So they really need a man motivator. Having said that, Fournier so far in his Ligue 1 and Ligue 2 career, he's always managed to get out of these tricky patches. And we do overreact a lot in modern day football, and I think you have to be a little bit careful. We're in the baby stages of this season. We've had just over a month or so of action, and let's look at the situation again in a month or two. But I think Lyon's problems lie actually this time they lie tactically, and let's see if Fournier is too stubborn to sort of accept that, or let's just see how the situation evolves.
Eric, still plenty of faith in Hubert Fournier?
Yes and no. I mean, we have to remember that last year, aside from Henri Bedimo, he was pretty lucky in terms of injuries. If we look at what would be a first-choice 11 for him last year, and Gourcuff, but he was still able to call upon a relatively strong team week in and week out. I'm looking at the likes of Gonalons, Ferry, Tolisso. All three of them played, only missed a handful of matches down to suspension. Fekir, the same thing. Lacazette missed about a month, but he was still a presence week in, week out. Ng was available most weeks. I think that now that he's facing a challenge in terms of personnel, with regard, and he's forced to operate at a higher level now with the Champions League and the expectations on the club and the league. I'm just wondering if this isn't a little bit beyond him. Come on, Arnold Mbemba, a capable squad player, but just the way he played against Bordeaux was shocking. Losing the ball, and trying to play Tolisso at the base of midfield. The shape that Lyon displayed on Saturday is the perfect example of how Fournier is. Again, he's devoted to this 4-4-2. But if you're playing a radically different set of players, you've got to make some tactical adjustments, whether it even be as minimal as something positional or just the way that he expects the players to operate. Because Steve Malbranc and Arnold Mbemba aren't Nabil Fekir and Maxime Gonalons. The team can't function in the same way just because you happen to be playing the same system. It's really, to me, shockingly naive that he can expect the same level of performance from a frankly entirely different set of players.
It was a bit strange, but I will say one thing for Lyon fans: get used to hearing Raphael's out for the week. That's going to be a very common theme in his Lyon career, as probably was in Manchester United as well. We will move on. Marseille, as usual, seemed to lose again after a good week. 2-1 defeat to Angers at the Velodrome. It's been a really up and down start for Michel. What is the real problem for this team, Christian?
Well, we've just been talking about potentially a manager being a bit stubborn. Now, again, it's very, very early days for Michel, and you have to, you cannot underestimate the circumstances with which he's had to come in. One game into the season, has to rally a completely disenchanted group of players. And bring in a new style of play. But, having said that, we know that Labrune was in contact with Michel since January. Michel turns up at the unveiling press conference, and seems to have somehow watched Marseille's last 14 games when the story goes that he was contacted, 5 or 6 days prior to that. So, Michel, we should give him a little bit of wiggle room in terms of blame, but also I feel like he might have known that he was in contention a bit earlier than has been reported so far. The 4-3-3 simply doesn't work for quite a few players in that team. Remy Cabella has been rightly slated for his poor start to the season, but the poor guy left Newcastle to play where he wants to play, in behind the striker or in a more central midfield role, and he was playing left wing at times yesterday against Angers. So he struggled to make an impact, and to be honest with you, he's sort of that marquee or perhaps highest profile signing in terms of what he might have done in Ligue 1 this season. We haven't been able to see that yet. Lassana Diarra has been fantastic, and that makes you wonder, Diarra has been great, but so how are they conceding these goals? And especially, against weaker opposition. Okay, Angers are interesting because, they've had a great start to the season, but the goals are they're not particularly impressive. And that's the other thing. Marseille, when they lose or when they sort of trip up like they did in midweek against Toulouse, they're not being absolutely destroyed, and they're having ball possession at times. But in that final third, they don't seem to exactly know what to do with it. Michy Batshuayi has not had the best start to the season, but you can't knock him necessarily. It's more that the difficulty when you get from Lassana Diarra to a wide player, because you're looking for someone in between the lines, in between the opposition's midfield and defense, and there simply isn't a player there, because you've got Remy Cabella trying to come deep to get the ball and then push out wide, and then whether it's Ocampos or Sarr, you've got out and out winger players, and then you're sitting with a Lassana Diarra and a midfield three generally, which we have to say has unfortunately been changing a lot because of injuries, etc. We have yet to see the great Abou Diaby grace Ligue 1 with his presence once again, and that might be, we laugh, but that might actually be a positive thing for Marseille, to have a player who can really drive on from midfield, or from that central midfield, and create that bridge between the midfield and attack that Marseille are lacking. I mean, also, we've had this strange decision, well, perhaps not strange when you look at the players in that back four, in that Marseille defence, who seem to be quite agile on paper, of playing a fairly high line. And against Lyon, that was a problem, and I think against Angers as well, it was a slight problem, because Billy Ketkeofun, who was fantastic, I thought, and has had a good start to the season for Angers, was able to exploit the centre-back pairing on the day. And I talked a little bit last week about how I'm not convinced by Nkulu as a defensive leader, or Karim Rekik, who seems to be one of those instinctive defenders who sort of acts first and thinks later. So Marseille have problems across the pitch. The early start to the season and the circumstances in which Bielsa left have not helped. But these Marseille problems, again, sometimes people say, okay, you're in a bad patch of form, you're unlucky. Yes, we're at the start of the season, but things have to be changed here, Nathan. There's no way that Marseille are going to have a successful season if they continue the way they're set up, and if they continue in this sort of spirit.
I can see what you mean. Sometimes it seems naive, doesn't it? Some of the goals that they concede seem so simple, and you mentioned there that they have such a high defensive line. When they go a goal behind, they're absolutely open for counterattacks every single time. It's insanity. And Eric, there's a lot to be fixed here, isn't there?
Yeah, again, the result on the weekend, I think, is a penalty and a free kick that just baffles me as to where Mandanda was thinking that was going to go. I mean, you watch Angers, that's how they approach free kicks from that area of the pitch. It was the same thing against Reims in midweek. I mean, that sort of ball to the 10 or 12 yard mark, just past the penalty spots, where they're going to put the ball into the box. That's been an effective strategy for them all season. Be ready for that. Personnel-wise, I think I agree. That high line can be effective, but that being said, if you're constantly swapping players in and out, again, you had another new pairing this weekend, Nkulu and Rolando. This is Rolando's first match. They're not going to have any sort of dialogue and ability so quickly. They're both experienced and fairly decent players, but that takes time to establish, and the more Michel keeps trying to juggle these players and switching them in and out, the less chance there is going to be of having an ability to play in that style which he seems to favor. Personnel-wise, I just don't understand what he's trying to do. Instead of this 4-3-3, I personally prefer to see a 4-2-3-1. Yeah. Abdelaziz Barada, God, how this guy gets a game week in and week out just blows my mind. I hate to hammer on one individual player, but I really don't see what Michel sees in him and what Bielsa saw in him, because aside from injury, he was still played quite a bit last year. He doesn't seem to have the creative dynamism that a lot of his fellow players seem to have. So move Cabella centrally, give these two young wingers, Sarr and Nkulu, a chance to show what they can do. Solidify midfield. Got Diarra, partner him with whether it's Lucas Silva or whether it's Romao, whoever it is. Create a more solid defensive base and let that front sort of four go at it. When Diaby comes back, he's a more dynamic player, as Diarra is too. So you can get more going forward with one of the central midfielders joining in the attack. But that seems to me like it's a much more balanced approach rather than this 4-3-3 where the personnel of the player's responsibilities constantly seem to be switching. I mean, and even Diarra, for as good of a player he is he's not really enough of this sort of defensive Iron Man that's going to anchor a three-man midfield. He's not a Thiago Motta that's going to just sort of calm players down and just make the easy pass to the wider midfield pair. He's someone who wants to get forward a little bit more himself, and we've seen that time and again how he can be effective. But if he's your most defensively oriented player beyond the back four, then you're probably going to be in trouble. And that's what we need. We need a tactical rethink. We need a consistent starting 11. I would say the Europa League, great. There's an easy group. It can be easily won, but that creates more problems. I think what Michel should do is buckle down, decide on a relatively consistent starting 11 for the league, and if he wants to have these experiments with all these seemingly random loanees, the likes of De Celia and Mauricio Isla, let them play in the Europa League. Make these next 30 league matches about developing a consistent, coherent starting 11. The talent's certainly there for this team to be in the top 3 or top 4, but not if he's seeming to roll dice and make that the starting lineup for the weekend outside of Batshuayi and Mandanda.
There's certainly a reason why Europe's elite has moved away from the 4-3-3. Now, it's okay. Maybe it worked at Olympiacos in the Greek league. No disrespect to our Greek friends, but it's simply, unless you've got one giant target man, which is exactly not really what Batshuayi is. He's got pace. He can hit teams on the counter very well. He has got an aerial presence, but that's not the exclusive part of his game. The 4-3-3 struggles to work because of this sort of recent invention, well, not recent, but fairly recent invention of having one or two deep-lying midfield players. It simply doesn't work effectively because now you need to play in between the lines, and with a 4-3-3, it's difficult to do that. I'd also say, again, what Eric is saying about this Europa League group is very interesting because, apparently Nkudu was simply rested for that game. That's exactly the wrong approach from Michel. This is a game against Angers, a newly promoted side. Sure, they're in form, but it's a home game against Angers, and what you should be trying to do is, getting those 3 points and creating some sort of stability after a frankly crazy game in Toulouse in midweek, and then an even crazier game against Lyon the previous weekend. So that seemed bizarre to me. And until that, as Eric says, until that team settles down, but I think specifically that back four. Now, Manquillo's shown some great promise so far going forward. Defensively, also he's shown some good promise. But again, you're subbing players in, out. Rolando, you've got to make a decision for this centre-back pairing. Is it Nkulu and Rekic? Is it Nkulu and Rolando? Is it even, at times, Rolando and Rekic for the Europa League? It doesn't really matter. But what does matter is that you play them consistently, also consistently in training, so that they have time to develop an understanding. Rolando, as I understand it, doesn't speak a word of French. Rekic, I don't know if he speaks French at all yet. So, it's questionable, to put it lightly, Nathan, what's going on there at the moment.
It's a little bit crazy, and I think you both were saying there that you're hoping on a winning in a prayer when Abu Diaby comes back. Well, that's like hoping that a 30-year-old car will start. It's not always going to be a promise that can be kept, and he must worry every time he stands out of bed, I think. But you can be as good a defensive midfielder in the world as you like. If your defensive line is 30 yards in front of your own goal and you've got that much space in behind, it's not difficult to get around it. But enough about...
It wasn't even that last weekend, Nathan. It was that that back four was not aligned. It was in a diagonal line for that Lyon penalty chance. You've got Rekic standing 3 meters in front of Nkulu, or the other way around. It was absolute madness.
It makes no sense. It's clearly unorganised, and that's, like you say, someone has to sort that out. But we'll stop moaning about Marseille, and let's give some praise to Angers, who've had a really, really terrific start to the season, Christian.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is a side that had a very interesting summer transfer window in terms of signing a mixture of previous players who had some experience in Ligue 1, although they haven't really featured, the likes of Jules Sunu, for example, who was at Evian, Lorient, and then of course at Arsenal before that. And some promising players from Ligue 2, the likes of Billy Ketkeo from Fon, who's got a great name, but was also very dangerous for Tours last season. And he was great, I thought, like yesterday. But also Romain Saïs, who is actually a good friend of Get French Football News, checks in from time to time with the odd interview, and is brought to some great midfield solidity alongside Mangani. So, who's also showed his abilities again on Sunday with that goal, and that mixture of experience and a back four. Talk about a settled back four with I believe it's Traoré and Thomas. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is the back two. Who have played every single game or virtually every single game from the start of the season. And when you have that stability and a goalkeeper in Butel who has something really to prove, having spent time at Lille and Metz before and never quite making it to that sort of first choice goalkeeper, you've all of a sudden got the spine of a team and the consistency to go and approach each Ligue 1 game in a way which you can say, okay, we might not be have 11 more talented players than the opposition, but we have a settled team and we know how we're going to approach this game. And their pre-season was impeccable, I remember. And actually, again, it shows how important it is to hit the ground running, especially if you're a newcomer, because not only do Ligue 1 sides not know so much about how you're necessarily going to line up, but also with a stable side and a side playing with confidence, you can all of a sudden take advantage of teams who are a little bit in a messy situation with the transfer window ongoing. That was the other thing. Apart from Jonathan Kodia, who went to Bristol City in a bizarre season, Angers have been able to hold together a squad which was with them in Ligue 2 and actually didn't offload that many players. Their squad is still quite large in terms of numbers because of the decision not to let go of too many players. So the wage budget is certainly the budget itself now is wearing thin, but what they've got is a really coherent group and a basis to make this Ligue 1 return something more normal each season, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and it's great to see them doing so well. I mean, 15 points at this stage of the season, you can absolutely deal with that. We'll move on to the last bit this week. It's European week again, and French teams are back in the Champions League and Europa League action. Lyon take on Monaco's conquerors Valencia on Tuesday in the main competition. What's your feeling before this one, Eric?
I would say that. Lyon are in a trouble here with the injuries that they've had. I'm thinking Raphael, Henri Bedimo, Jeremy Morel. Yeah, he's a talented left back, but what he offers versus what Bedimo can offer, power, real drop off. I think that it's possible that Lyon are getting Valencia at the right time. They've got. There's Diego and Matt Ryan are injured, and Juan May is going to make the start tomorrow, it appears. But this is still a very sound Valencia team, and I think that it's potentially going to be very, very difficult for Lyon on current form to break them down. I think that Valencia will probably see a draw as a decent result, and are probably going to keep it very close to the vest. They've only conceded 2 goals in 6 La Liga matches this season, whereas last season they were the fourth best defense in Spain. So Lyon have their work cut out for them, and they need to score. If they've really got any significant hopes of progressing, a draw is not going to be enough. They need to get 3 points.
I think 3 points are vital. We apologise for that echo. Then it does seem to be from one of our microphones. I'll see if it works again. No, it does seem the echo. We're going to have to mute you, I'm afraid, free question for the moment, so we'll move on to the next game, Eric. PSG, Shakhtar, usually a tricky one away in Donetsk, but obviously for political reasons it's not going to be played there. What do you think of before that one?
I think PSG will go here and try and play pretty open and get 3 points. I mean, if they're looking at 6 points going into their 2 matches with Real Madrid, they're going to be in good shape. Shakhtar are reeling again the political situation, but not only that, but the losses of the likes of Douglas Costa, Enrique Mkhitaryan, Fernandinho over the past couple of years, Luis Adriano this summer as well. This is really a team that's sort of reeling from their recent outflow of transfers, players who don't want to deal with the political situation in the Ukraine, and frankly, who can blame them? So yeah, they should go there, set up to attack, and look to get 6 points, and really, give themselves a very good chance of putting it to Real Madrid, and give themselves a good chance of winning this group.
Yeah, and Shakhtar lost a couple of decent players in the summer as well to different clubs. I think they're not quite as big of the powerhouse that people were worried about. There's a really big game in the Europa League as Monaco take on Tottenham, who had a fantastic result of the weekend. I mean, I was watching the game, and they really put hammer and tongue to Manchester City at one point by the end. But do Monaco stand a chance in this one? If Tottenham are famous for sort of rotating in Europa League stuff, there might be a chance in this one, or?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen Monaco score 6 goals in their last 2 matches. I mean, I don't like it, but I do think that they are going to be that much more entertaining with this 4-2-3-1. If Toulon can be fit, you get a defensive midfield of Fabinho and Toulon, or Bakayoko and Fabinho to get some solidity and let those attacking players do their thing. The team looked wonderfully dynamic with El Shaarawy up top against Guingamp at the weekend. I know Guingamp are not at as high of a standard as Tottenham, but there's still something to be said for being that much more open and attacking. And yeah, I'm looking forward to an exciting open game with Spurs youngsters, or not first choice 11 as it were, wanting to show Pochettino what they can do. So let's look at a 3-2 Monaco, a nice exciting match that will get the blood pumping.
Well, yeah, I can quite easily see Clinton Ng starting the game for Tottenham since he came on at the weekend. That will be good to see him back in action, hopefully. Another relatively big game in Europa League, Saint-Étienne take on Lazio, who are a good team, really. It's going to be a tricky one.
Yeah, Lazio are sort of this enigmatic presence, and it's hard to really see what it'll come out with. But Saint-Étienne, I'm a little worried about them. At that result on the weekend, like I said, their minds are probably turned towards this match against the Italian team, but to concede 4 goals at home with, again, what I said is, barring Kevin Teofil-Catherine, is really their first choice 11. That's really disappointing for them. I wrote a nice article on the site last week talking about how, Saint-Étienne seemed to have a little bit more depth to the squad, and there were some exciting new players coming into the team. I'm talking specifically about Beric, Jonathan Bamba, and the 2 fullbacks, Polomat and Malcuit. But to have a result like that, and to take on Lazio away, Stadio Olimpico, when it's Lazio's home stadium, is a tough place to go. Those are some pretty rabid fans there, and it's going to be a tough atmosphere. So I'd probably go with Lazio to get the win there. Something narrow, 2-1 or 1-0.
Yeah, and I have to agree with that one, really. I mean, Lazio have some really talented forward players. I mean, Felipe Anderson is going to go somewhere, and he's a special talent. Very quickly then, Eric, Bordeaux heading to Russia to take on Rubin. Do you think you can get 3 points from there?
No. Scoreless draw or 1-1 Rubin aren't the team that they were 3 or 4 years ago when they were in the Champions League qualifiers, but between the journey and the forced rotation that Samuel is going to have to do, I really can't see Bordeaux putting the kind of dominant performance they did at the weekend. So yeah, a draw on some level. I'm not 1-0 or 1-1 or 0-0.
And Marseille obviously hosting Slovan Liberec. Do you think that's an easy win for Marseille, really, on paper?
wouldn't say easy, but with the offensive talent that Marseille have, even if Michel's having some problems putting it together, 3-1, 3-0, something in that neighborhood, a fairly solid victory.
Yeah, and that will do us for that this week. Thank you, Eric, and my thanks to Christian as well, who unfortunately had to mute for the last 5 minutes with a bit of an echo problem, a bit of a microphone problem. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in again, and we will see you again next week. Have a good evening.